It truly is a joy to be a father. But as a dad, it's not something that we take lightly, and it's not something that is free. There is actually a cost to being a dad. There is a cost. What is the cost? What is the cost that each dad would pay? I had the opportunity last year to go and meet new dads in the Rockhampton Hospital here. Got a chance to meet sort of new dads for those that had 5 kids already and that this was their 6th, to those who were the very first time dads. Even before they would become a dad, they were sharing about all their dreams and that sort of thing. I met this one dad. He said him and his partner, they used to go to Bali every year. That was their holiday every year, and they said, when the kids come along, he's just going to come along with us, and we're going to do this every year and every year and year and year. And I met many dads like this. They're just going, this kid's, it's not going to change my schedule. They're not going to change anything. And I can hear some dads laughing out there, because internally I was laughing as well, going, this kid is going to change everything. If you want to be an effective and a true and a good dad, the kids will completely change your schedule. And so I'm sitting there, these dads going, it's not going to cost me anything. And you're going, to be a good dad, you will realize in time that it truly costs you a lot. To be a dad, it costs you sleepless nights, particularly when they're younger. But even when they're older, those with teenagers or young adult dads, they say it's sleepless nights. I don't know where my kids are. There's the burden in that. As a dad, there's an increased burden to financially provide for our kids, to give them a great start in life. There's a burden that a dad carries to financially provide, and that is a cost. There's a burden to create a safe space for our kids so that they can play around and have all the fun that they have, climb up trees, fall off. But there's a burden to create that safe space with a level of risk. There is a burden of time that dads have. We have to invest time in our kids. And sometimes we have to give up something else in order to invest that time in our children. There's a burden of responsibility. There's a burden of giving up lifestyle, giving up dreams that we once had, that have been radically changed because of our kids. And as a dad, often these moments are quite difficult to give up these. Often the cost is too difficult to bear sometimes. However, as a dad, we wouldn't swap anything. We would pay that cost time and time and time again for our kids. We wouldn't give anything up them because we love our children. There is a cost to being a dad, but we as dads are willing to pay it. For those who seek to follow Jesus, Jesus makes it very clear that there is a cost to following him. There is a cost to following Jesus. In fact, Jesus, when we compare it to the cost that dads pay, it is a significantly higher cost and calling to be a disciple of Jesus than it is to be a dad. It's hard. Jesus mentions multiple times about the cost. To the rich man in Matthew 19, he says, that if you want to follow me, you need to go and sell all your possessions and you need to go and give it to the poor to follow me. You need to give up everything before you come follow me. That was to the rich man. To the crowds, he says, if anyone comes to me and does not hate their father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple. That's a high cost. Dads, we're thinking there, I don't want to give up my children. There's a significant cost that he talks to the crowds. It also says in Luke 9, he says, whoever wants to be my disciple, they must deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. They must go through one of the most severe and hardest punishments that has ever been in the world, to die on a cross to follow me. That's the cost. After the feeding of the 5,000 and huge crowds following him and some difficult teaching, Jesus in John 16, John captures a response from some of the disciples. It says, on hearing, many of the disciples said, "This is hard teaching. Who can accept it?" And from this time, many of his disciples turned back and no longer followed him. No longer followed Jesus. Now, following Jesus, there is a whole bunch of blessings. Yeah, you would agree with me, there's a whole bunch of blessings that come from following Jesus. Today, we're not going to talk about those things because you would have to be here for hours if we were to talk about those things. But today, I want to focus specifically on the cost to follow Jesus. You know, there's blessings to be a dad, but there is a cost to being a dad. And there is also a cost to following Jesus. And we cannot deny, as we read a bunch of those passages, that the cost is significantly high. Now, the cost for each person is different, though. There's not a generic cookie-cutter cost that everybody must do this. The cost is different. But the reality is that for each and every one of us who wants to be a disciple of Jesus must be willing to pay that cost. Because we know that for those who follow Jesus, there is a great blessing in that. We know that true life is found in losing it for Jesus' sake. This is what he says here. If you're willing to deny yourself and take up your cross and follow me, this is the call. True life is found in losing it for Jesus' sake. Losing it for Jesus' sake. As we talk about dads on Father's Day, dads, I was wrestling with this week. Because one of those passages that I read out says that if anyone does not hate their father or mother, wife and children, such a person cannot be my disciple. That hits hard. I'm going, I don't think I could give up my kids. I don't think I could release them. The cost is high. Would you be willing to give it up? Now, we've been on this series of practicing the way, and we continue on that today. And it's fitting that it talks about the cost of following Jesus. Because there is a cost to being a dad, but there is a greater cost to following Jesus. And this series on Practice the Way helps to categorize various layers of sin. For those who are doing the study, whether you've done it this week or you'll do it in the following weeks, John talks about 4 layers of sin. The first layer, he talks about these gross sins. These are sins that aren't gross in terms of yucky, but gross in the terms of I made a gross mistake. They are significant sins that we have. These are gross sins. The next layer he talks about is conscious sins. These are sins that are socially acceptable in our culture, or even celebrated in our culture, but they are not the way of Jesus. Other sins he talks about are these unconscious sins. These are sins these are things that we don't actually consciously know we're doing, meaning things that we don't do, or rather the things that we do. So these are things that we unknowingly don't do. So if Jesus is calling us to do something, and we don't do it, that's an unconscious level of sin. So I'm not going to unpack all those in details, but there's one layer of sin that he actually focuses on, and this is attachment sin. We've got some slides. Are we going through the slides? There's a few. Yeah. Keep going. Yeah. No, keep going. Where we go? Oh, it must not be on there. All good. Attachment sins. So our attachment sins, when he talks about sins, the Bible and the Christian language normally talks about in the terms of idols. We know that term. Everybody's heard, people have heard that term. Idols, things that we kind of put in front of ourselves. Yeah, these are our things that we kind of put our trust in, that we actually find happiness in. These sort of sins are actually not bad things. These sins are often good things. These attachment things, sins that we actually, and things that we actually put in that are good in our life. Everyone would agree that children are good in our lives. Wives are good in our lives. Yeah, our houses that we live in are good things in our lives. These attachments that we get to. And an attachment sin is something that you put in front of God, that God is calling you to release, something that you attach yourself to that stops you from following Jesus. These are things that prevent you from actually fulfilling what God has called you to. For the rich man, that was his possessions. He was so attached to his possessions, and Jesus knew that, and so he called him out for that. You need to sell those things to follow me, because you won't follow me unless you release those things. So we need to be releasing attachments to God, otherwise they become a sin. They actually become a space where we disobey God. Each of us have different things that we are attached to. Different things that we've either bought or we've been part of or we have committed to. And these are often really good things. See, for me, I have various attachments and things like that. Various things that are attached to you, and not just this blue string that is attached to me. But I'm pretty attached to being a dad. I'd find it very difficult to give up my children. My daughter gave me this little handprint, little bag today of her hand. I'm pretty attached to that. A few years ago, Olivia wrote this. I've got this in my office. It's a really bad picture, but I love it. And it says, "To Daddy, you are the best daddy," from Olivia. Pretty attached to my kids. The thought of giving them up to follow Jesus is a high cost. For dads, we often find purpose in fixing things. I've got a spanner here. We like fix things. We find purpose. We find our joy often in fixing things, whether it's a car or something else, whether it's fixing something in our family or fixing something around the house. We like to fix things. Women give us problems, and we want to fix them. It's innate nature to us. And we want to fix them because we find meaning and these things are good. But to give up that to follow Jesus, would you be willing to? Would you be willing to give up those things to follow him? These are good things. It's a good thing to fix things. What about your car? I've got my car keys here. I love my car. Would I be willing to give up my car to follow Jesus? Would I be willing to give up my house? I got my house keys on there. Would I be willing to give that up to follow Jesus? These are the things that we are attached to. Some of us are attached to different experiences that we go through that help us to follow Jesus. This is my baptism certificate. 7th of September, 2008. It's the 7th today. Did you know that? This was a time where I publicly decided to follow Jesus. But I didn't stop there. I didn't stop with this fact of following Jesus. I'm pretty attached to this moment and have kept this certificate because it's a significant moment. But if I hold firm to something that is good, and don't continue to follow Jesus and stay in the past, it can become a sin that holds me back from following Jesus. Now, this one's not mine, but it couldn't come on stage with me. This is attached to that 1929 Chevy at the back there. Dodge. I wrote it down, but I didn't read it. It's a Dodge. This is Lyle's in the front here that has generously brought it in for this Sunday. Yeah. And I would like to take it home, so I'm attached to it. Took him 17 years to rebuild this car, put it back. It's got the name of his dad on the back there who's passed away. To give this up, that would be a significant cost. Yeah, we get attached to various different things, and you're thinking of things in your life that you're attached to. And Jesus is dealing with these things when he talks about the cost of discipleship. These attachments, they are good things. That's a great car. That's a good thing to have. But these attachments can actually become sinful when God calls us to release these things. That in the sight of God, God calls us to release them in order to follow Jesus. Because we know that true life is found in Jesus. True life is found in losing it for the sake of Jesus, releasing these things for the sake of Jesus. They become sinful when we hold on to these very things and not pay the price that God calls us to. Now, Jesus is the perfect example for giving up his life to follow Jesus. And you see various other examples. Probably the second best example in the Bible we have is the Apostle Paul. He gave up so much to follow Jesus. Yeah. And sometimes even people who he loved dearly didn't even believe him or didn't sort of deny him or give him the right space. In the church in Corinth is one of those things. He had to defend his position in the church in Corinth to be a good leader in that space, even though he loved and showed Jesus to these people. And as he's doing this, 2 Corinthians 2, verse 4, 7 to 12, we see the cost that the Apostle Paul had to pay. He says, "But we have this treasure in jars of clay to show his all-surpassing power from God that is not from us." Verse 8, he says, "We are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed. Perplexed, but not in despair. Persecuted, but not abandoned. Struck down, but not destroyed. We always carry around in our body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may be revealed in our body. For we who were alive are always being given over to death for Jesus' sake, so that his life might be revealed in our mortal bodies. So then death is at work in us, but life is at work in you." Paul is starting to say there that death is at work. He's paying the cost, and it's so significant. So significant. He uses these words that he is hard pressed on every side, but not crushed. See the sense that he's holding on to God. He goes, God is my strength in that. I'm hard pressed. There's tough times that are coming against, but I know God is there, so I'm not crushed. Perplexed, but not in despair. Persecuted, but not abandoned. Struck down, but not destroyed. This is a great image of the cost to follow Jesus. I've got an image of a jar up there. That first verse, Paul talks about himself as a jar of clay. Maybe similar to this, maybe different. Yeah. But what you notice about that jar is it is cracked on every side. Now, that jar is so cracked and broken that it should be falling apart. But it isn't. It's like God is holding that jar together, that God is holding it together, and God does the same for us. He holds our lives together. Yeah. His incredible treasure of the gospel and the kingdom of God is inside us. And this is the truth that Paul knew. And he knew that whatever price he had to pay to follow Jesus and what God called him to, he knew that whatever pain he had to go through, that God would be there. That God would hold him together, this jar of clay. Now, jars of clay in ancient worlds weren't like nice ornate pots. They were disposable. They were like takeaway containers. They were thrown out once they were used after one thing. They weren't really nice and pretty. And this is what Paul was saying. I'm like this. There's a cost for me to follow Jesus, Paul is saying, and I'm willing to pay it. And for each of us, there is a cost. Now, sometimes when we move in this space, we think about the extreme of the cost. We think about giving up everything. We think about Tim and Mel, who gave up everything, went to live in Malawi. They gave up their perfect kids' education and educated them in Malawi. We think about the missionaries that go to the ends of the earth, like Paul. And sometimes when we think that that is the cost, most of us go, we can never pay that cost. And then we don't pay any cost. You see, the cost of following Jesus for some of us is small. There's still a cost. For some of us, it's greater. But each and every person, God is calling, saying, to follow me, there is a cost. So don't simply think, there's no way I can give up that things and pay that cost, because there's no way I can be like Mel and Tim. There's no way I can be like Paul and give up everything. But start with something small. Each of us have things that we are attached to, that we have to give up for the sake of Jesus. There are those that have significant costs, and there are those that have small costs. It doesn't matter the level of cost. There is a cost to following Jesus, a true cost. Now, I've been in ministry just over 10 years now. And these last 12 months have been some of the most difficult 12 months in ministry. Many of you may not know. The cost to follow Jesus and to fulfill his call this 12 months has been difficult. Quite difficult. Sorry. Shouldn't apologise. For 7 months of these last 12 months, I've struggled with significant fatigue. September last year, I really was not sleeping well and truly struggled to the point where many times I broke down and just I just can't keep going. I struggled. I was hardly sleeping. Well, I was sleeping, but I wasn't getting any rest. I'm thinking, how can I keep going? It was impacting my family. There's moments where I just went, I just need to take leave. I just need to take time off. But there was moments where I just went, no, I need to keep going because God has called me to this. There's moments in my role, since the middle of June, I've had this cough that has just plagued me. There's moments where, if you've heard me in the office, I just go, stop it. It's so frustrated me. It's been difficult. There's been other pressures in these last 12 months that have been quite difficult for me to fulfill this role that God has called me to. And it has cost a significant amount, more than I ever have in the last 10 years of ministry. This last 12 months has been difficult. Now I look at people and I go, they've got a more difficult space to me, and that sort of thing. But the reality is that's great. There are people that are struggling more than me. But there is a cost for each of us to bear, and the cost this year. And there's many times where I could have just given up. There are many times where I could have just gone, nah, I'm not following God. Well, I'm following God, but I'm not going to work in the church anymore. It's in those moments where you sort of feel like you're going, I'm not being supported. There's moments in that where you're going, I just need, not only just my church family, but I need my immediate family around me to support me. And my immediate family, they live down in Brisbane, elsewhere. And there's moments where we see other people in our church family, and I go, oh, they've got their family to support them. Like, we want that. Yeah. But I'm reminded by Jesus each and every moment of that time that there is a cost to following Jesus. Yeah, each of us has a different ones, and for us, that leaving the family, father and mother, is a cost to following Jesus. We don't have that support. We can't go for a weekend away. We can't leave the family when we're having a hard day. There is a significant cost. And these last 12 months has been difficult. However, I would not change it for anything. This last 12 months has been one of the most fruitful 12 months in my entire ministry. Those that have come to know Jesus and grown deeper in Jesus has been greater than any of the other 12-month periods in the entire ministry that I've been paid and in volunteer roles. And so I would pay that cost time and time and time again to see that again. We've had to, in these last 12 months, give up significant family time and quality family time in order to pay that price. We've had to give up and deny ourselves sometimes to the point where even denying the health sometimes in order to continue my role. But I would pay that price and release that quality time and time again. What is it costing you to follow Jesus? You may not have had a difficult 12 months, but each of us has something that we need to give over to Jesus in order to following him. To follow Jesus and to pay that cost, it requires releasing those attachments to God. Yeah. These things that we are attached to, sometimes they impact following Jesus. Yeah. These things that we are attached to, sometimes they actually get in the way of us following Jesus. Yeah. From family. Yeah. To the car and your house. Sometimes we have to release these very things to actually follow Jesus. I don't want to give up this one. Yeah. The idea of someone, I'm going to fix things. Sometimes we have to release these things to God. So my question today is, what do you need to release? There is a cost to following Jesus, just like there is a cost for being a dad. What thing that you are attached to do you need to release to Jesus in order to follow him? For some of you, it will be your finances. I've been encouraged by multiple stories of people who have given up sacrificially their finances to the Malawi team. It's been so encouraging to see that. They have given not out of the overflow of what they have, but they have given even when they didn't really have it. That's a cost of following Jesus. That's what Jesus called them to do, and they were willing to give it up. For some of you, which is a big thing, we are called to give up and release our time to God. Time with family sometimes. In this last 12 months, there's been a lot of times where I'm going, I'm so exhausted. When I get home, I'm exhausted. When I go to work, I'm exhausted. And then my family are not getting the quality time. And I had to wrestle with that and release that as an attachment, going, God, this is what you've called me to. God, I give my family over to you. And I release it to you. May the time that we have, be good and quality time. Some of you may need to release and spend more time that God's calling you. Maybe you have your me time, the time where you go away and do all different things for yourself. Maybe you need to release that. Some of you get stuck in family routines. Family routines, it's a good thing. These attachments are good things. But sometimes our family routine gets in the way of following God. And so some of us may need to release that to God today. Some of us may need to give up our house, give up more sleep. For some of us, it's not a thing. But some of us may need to actually release some of our worldview, release some of the things that have become our traditions, that have become our very beliefs that we built our life on. Some of us may need to release that to God because we're so attached to that we can't allow God to walk in. And so we need to release that to God and allow God to create our worldview and our traditions. For some of us, and each of us, we have a dream lifestyle. Just like the guy at the start who said, we're going to go to Bali every year. That's our holiday. That's our dream. That's our goal. When kids came along, he's going to have to change that. And so some of us, we have a dream. We were driving to a party last night, across some acreage and some farmland areas. And for my wife and I, that's always been like this sort of dream of owning acreage and having horses. We always joke around when we were looking for our first house. There was this acreage property we looked at. And in the description, it said, horse-friendly acres. And it's a dream. But for us, I don't think we'll ever get there. We're willing to give that up to follow Jesus. We want to be amongst people. We want to be in amongst people. We want to welcome people into our space. And so we're willing to give up that dream to follow Jesus. And to release that attachment to God and allow God's blessings to flow into that. So as the worship team come up, I want you to think about in this last song, I've shown a bunch of examples of things that you could release to God. But what is one thing? What's one thing that you're attached to in this moment that has come to your mind right now? It's likely the thing that God is saying, you need to release this. It's likely the very thing that God is saying, that's getting in the way of following me. So what's one thing that you can release to God today? So write it down. Get out your phone, write on your phone, and pray through that and going, is God calling me to release that?